Hi everyone, my name is James. Welcome to King's Fine Woodworking. Today I'm going to share with you how I built these architectural knee braces. My cousin owns a decking company and he needed these to stiffen up a roof structure that he was building in a backyard for a project, and these both add structural strength and ornamental detail to the project. So the first thing we did is we went to the big box store and got some 4x6 Douglas fir. So for the next step here, I am making a template, and I'm making a template out of Baltic birch plywood. Baltic birch is really the best for this because there are no voids in the side of it, and I'm going to be using this template in conjunction with my router in order to cut a perfect copy of this pattern. And when the bearing from the router rolls along the template, if the template edge is nice and smooth without voids, it'll transfer that nice smooth look up to the cut piece of wood. It's important to take your time for a cut like this. If I'm making a template, it's going to act as a pattern in order to cut all of the pieces exactly the same. So I'm going to take my time and cut just outside of the pencil line, and then I'm going to sand it down to the pencil line with my sanders, and I'm going to make every effort to make this as perfect of a piece as I can get. And here I'll just take my time and sand it right down to the line exactly, and also to make sure that we have a nice continuous round contour. Even though this is an outdoor project that is a little bit closer to construction than it is to fine woodworking, the principles are exactly the same. There are many times in woodworking when we need to make a template or a pattern from which to cut many other pieces, and the procedure that we follow here is identical. That's the reason I wanted to make a video of this process. Once the template is perfect, I will trace it onto the piece of wood that I'm going to cut. And then I'm going to take and cut the 245s off first, and those need to be exact, so I'm going to go right to the line on these. Those are the two corners, the two edges that are going to mate up with the structure. Once that's done, we'll take it over to the bandsaw and we will cut the excess material away. Now here, I want it to be perfect, so I'm going to get it perfect on the router table with a router bit. So what I want to do here is just cut it down so we only have somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch of extra. I could have more extra than that, but it just makes for more work at the router table. So I want to get as close as I can to the line here, but I don't actually want to cut the line while doing this. When I cut into the line, I've changed the shape and I can no longer have a perfectly shaped piece. Once again, since this is an outdoor project, that's not necessarily critical, but if it were an indoor project or a piece of fine furniture, that would be a big deal. Alright, so now that we have that rough cut, I'm going to put down some two-sided tape. And this is how we're going to stick the template on. Once it's on in the right position, we need to just press down firmly. This two-sided tape becomes strong when you put it under pressure. And then the next step is to take it over to the router table. Now this is a pattern cutting bit. This is a real beast of a bit, a lot bigger than you might ordinarily see, and we have a great big one because we do a lot of professional or industrial woodworking, and so we have an oversized one here, but any pattern cutting bit will really work. You might also notice that the piece of wood that we are cutting is taller than the bit. So I can't actually cut the whole thing to become the right size at the same time. I'm going to have to cut it in two steps. First the bottom, and then I'll have to flip around and do the top. And I'll show you how I do that. And you should be able to see the bearing at the bottom, which is riding along the piece of plywood, the plywood template. And that's what's guiding the bit, the cutter head itself, to make a perfectly shaped piece from the pattern. Alright, with the first half complete, I'm going to have to switch router bits and make the transition to cutting the other side. The first time we used a pattern cutting bit that has a bearing on the bottom, and the next time we're going to use a flush trim bit which has the bearing on the top. Now I've switched the bearing here. In this case, the bearing is going to ride along the flush surface, or ride flush along the surface that I have already cut. You should be able to see that here. The template up top is no longer coming into play. And I really didn't cut this as close as I should have, so I'm going really slow to get this cut down to the edge of the wood where it needs to be. And then I'll proceed to just follow this pattern all the way around. And this flush trim bit is going to trim it flush, flush to the existing cut that I have all the way around. And typically, if you're going to ever do a very deep cut, you would need both. You'll need a template bit and a flush trim bit in order to accomplish it. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. You guys rock. You really help us out and support us when we need it most with videos. So whenever I get suggestions from you guys, we tend to make those as quick as we can and get them out. And this is one of those projects where somebody just wanted to see more outdoor stuff and outdoor projects related to porches and patios. And so I thought we'd throw this in here for you guys. Again, thanks for all your support. Alright, so then that's done. We'll take a look at it. I generally like to feel the curves, make sure they're smooth, and that I don't have to go back over anything again. And then we'll peel up our template for future use and get the tape off, and then we'll go ahead and sand the piece down. This piece is done up to this stage, and that's the basic shaping. And since it's an outdoor project, we're going to sand this with a fairly rough grit. It is getting painted per the customer's request, so there's not going to be any fine or detail sanding going on here. Just enough for me to smooth these contours, and if there's any little hint of a line between the upper and lower cut, which sometimes there is on soft woods, we'll make that disappear with the sandpaper. I'd also like to give a shout out and say hi to the members of our Kings Find Woodworking community on Facebook. If you're on Facebook and you're interested, you can join our group. It's a great place to share projects that you're working on and to get questions answered. There are woodworkers there with every different level of expertise. And I'll put a link to that in the description below. Alright, so I'm just going to take a moment to show you one other way that you might do this without taking the time to draw the lines in. And that's if we just take the template directly, I put double-sided tape on it, and just tape the template directly to the wood before we even draw a line. I'm using the steel squares there to make sure that I don't bring the front of this accidentally, the front of the template accidentally past the front of the wood. And once I know it's in the right position, I'll just press this down firmly. And remember, this double-sided tape needs pressure in order to make sure that it secures fully. And I'll just leave the template on in this case, and I'll be careful when I cut the corners off to go right up next to the edge of it, but not quite touch it. And I'm going to do something very similar here with the bandsaw. I'm just going to go ahead and take my cuts. I'm going to be very careful about it and just try to stay about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the template. So you can see this speeds it up a little bit. You don't have to take the time to draw a line, pull the template off, cut it, and put the template back on. We do it kind of all in one procedure. But this does come with some risk. If you aren't careful when you cut, and you accidentally cut into the template, well, then your template's ruined. And if you needed to make 8 or 10 pieces and they all had to be exactly the same, then you'd have a problem. So I would recommend, if you're doing some fine woodworking and you're working indoors on a project that you need to have perfect, you do it the first way that I did it, and very carefully set it on there, trace it, cut it too big, and then tape your template on after the fact. Since this particular project didn't have to be exact, I went ahead and taped it on and then did the cuts after the fact to save just a little bit of time. And the rest of the procedure after that's exactly the same. And then in this case, I went ahead and did all of the cuts with one router bit. I think we did 9 of these pieces total, and then I did all of the cuts with the second router bit, so I only had a single router bit change in order to complete the rest of these. And then after that, of course, we followed up with sanding. And here's a quick of what they all looked like when they were done. I think we actually needed 8 total. I just made 1 extra in case we messed one up out on the site. Easier to do it now. Next, we're going to drill some recess holes for some bolts. These knee braces are both ornamental and they're going to be structural. So we're going to put a 5-inch long LedgerLock lag bolt, I think 4 of them total, 2 high and 2 low, in each knee brace for strength. And so this is really just the pre-drill for the bolt head itself. This is a 5/8 inch hole, which is just a little bit bigger than the head washer combination that's on the LedgerLock. And you see I've got my fence and a little stop block set up so that my knee brace can't move left or right. And I've got a little 2x2 board there preventing it from going too far forward. That kind of locks it in on 3 sides and make sure that it doesn't move around when we drill this in with the Forstner bit. Pretty straightforward, just drilled one side, flipped the board around, drilled the other, and I followed that same procedure and did all 9 of them the same way. Then once that was done, we switched bits while all of the fences and everything were in the same spot exactly. So this bit is lined up in the dead center, and this is the diameter of the shank of the bolt itself that's going to go through there. And I'm just clearing out that material with this. And we'll do the same thing here as well. We'll flip the knee brace around and do both sides, and then proceed through all of them. Once this series of holes has been completed, the procedure is pretty simple. I do want to get 2 bolts on each side, so we're just going to move that yellow 2x2 board there forward about 2 inches, and that's going to allow us to slide the knee brace in about 2 inches further so that we can hit a second hole. And you can see how that works there. And once again, we're just going to follow the same procedure again. We'll drill a hole there, flip it around, drill a hole on the other side. This hole did have to go a little bit deeper because the 2 bolts are the same length, and that way I get the same amount of bite on both ones as they go into the posts or the beams on that patio cover. But that's it, just the same procedure here on all 9, and then we switched back to the 5/16 inch bit in order to drill the hole for the bolt clearance itself. So once this goes into place and all of those bolts are done and installed, we're going to have the holes there, and this project's going to get painted. So I'm going to go ahead and cut some plugs. This is a 5/8 inch plug cutter, and it's going to just create a plug with face grain exposed, and to be exactly 5/8 of an inch, they'll fit perfectly in those Forstner bit holes. And then we have the completed series of 9 with all of the holes drilled, and we're ready to run these out to his job site so they can get installed. So this is my cousin Steven in the red shirt up on the ladder there, and our friend Jim. The 2 of them make up one of the crews for my other cousin's company. It's Steven's older brother Dale that owns the company, and they're very popular. They do huge decks and outdoor patios and outdoor living environments all throughout Washington and Oregon and California and Colorado. And some of the projects they do are $250,000 and up. Just really fantastic stuff. So anyways, basically Jim is positioning this here exactly where he wants it, and Steven is putting it in. He's using a LedgerLock screw. It's a structural screw, an engineered screw that's designed to replace a lag bolt that holds a ledger onto a house for a deck. So it's a very strong screw, and they're getting a pair of these high and a pair of these low all the way around, so it's going to add considerably to the structural integrity of this patio cover. This is actually just a freestanding cover out in the yard of one of the customers. And Jim has taken the time to make sure that both of them come to the same altitude. Even though they're cut perfectly the same length, he just wants to make sure that at the bottom, where it's going to be a little bit more visible, that they end up being at the same height. And they'll just proceed to install this one just like they did the first one. If you're ever doing an outdoor project, the cool thing about these LedgerLocks is they don't actually have to be pre-drilled. You can just drive them directly into whatever surface you're putting them into, and they're not going to split the wood. With the installation complete, it's time to plug those holes. So we'll take the plugs that I've cut and we'll pop them free from the block of wood that I cut them in. Usually just a thin screwdriver works. You bend it sideways and it'll just snap the grain down low, and you have access to those plugs. For outdoor use, the quickest way to install these is to use CA glue and accelerator. We just put some CA around the bottom section of the plug, spray the accelerator right into the hole, and then quickly push the plug home, and within about 2 or 3 seconds the piece will cure, it'll set up, and it's permanent. Just go around all of the different holes and do this exact same procedure. And this is what happens if you don't push the plug in quite fast enough. Sometimes it'll start to cure before you get it fully seated. But that's okay, it'll still get a good solid grip right there, and everything will be just fine. And luckily the back of Steven's head is protected with those safety glasses in the event that any of that CA glue will fall back there. With CA glue and accelerator, the plugs set up almost immediately. So right away you can go ahead and trim them off, and he's just using a standard Japanese pull saw here. He's going to cut them off. You can cut them off a little bit bigger than flush, especially if it's a softwood, because it takes almost no time for the sander to sand them down to nice and flush. He's going to use a pretty aggressive grit here so it goes nice and quick, and having a cordless sander for a touch-up job really speeds things up too. I'll be putting some links in the description below for all of the hand tools and router bits and things like that we used for the project. Just in case you're interested, you can go there and check those out. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who does buy things from Amazon through our Amazon links. That really helps support our channel. Amazon gives our channel a small commission for everything that gets sold through there, so we really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. And that's looking pretty good there. I think this thing's just about ready for paint. So this is what it all looks like after all 4 of them are done. I know they're going to put a ceiling on the inside of this. It's like a tongue and groove cedar. But this was just my involvement in the project, was these knee braces. So I thought I might bring you along and show you what we did there. And that's really it for today's project. Thank you for watching.